Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 7th in the year 2022. In case this becomes a time capsule of sorts, there will always be a reference point. Lots to think about. Lots to think about with respect to the subject that we are covering today. This is the second part of Greek Gospel Kool-aid. Part 2, Smash and Grab Kingdom. This is the second part. I can't promise you that it's going to be short, and I hope that it won't be terribly long. You'll probably have to watch it a couple of times in order to track with me, or maybe go back and forth, but whatever you have to do in all of your get it, hopefully. So today we're going to be talking about, in this part 2, we're going to be discussing and revealing the identity of Ben HaPoretz. Ben HaPoretz, the son of the one who breaks through, or the one who breaks through. I'm going to read you a little reference from Mishnah Avot. Mishnah Avot, which comes from the Talmud. Okay, don't get triggered. Mishnah Avot, chapter 1, verse 1, it reads as follows. Be deliberate in judgment, raise many disciples, and build a hedge or a fence around the Torah. Build a hedge or a fence around the Torah. What does that mean? Well, the whole concept of building a fence and or a hedge about the Torah comes from a verse found in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 8. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 8. And I want to read that really quickly. And this is where it's primarily believed that the whole notion of building a fence or a hedge about the Torah came to be. And then we'll explain what the whole system of fences and hedges are. But Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 8 reads as follows. When you build a new house, then you shall make a fence for your roof, that you do not bring blood upon your house if any man falls from thence. Okay, so if you are building a new house, you are told to build a fence on the roof of that new house so you won't bring blood upon your house in the event that someone falls from that roof. So now that doesn't seem very conventional, in line with what we're used to. But again, things will become clearer as we move along. So chumrah is a fence or a partition or an additional requirement that's placed upon a commandment in the attempt to preserve it, meaning that the commandment itself is seen as the crown jewel. Okay, it's seen as something that's pristine and that needs to be protected. Okay. And therefore a hedge is built around it so no one either encroaches on it or gets so lofty and high up on it that they fall off of it and spill their own blood. Chumrah is what it's called, and one who would impose such a thing on himself was known then as a machmir. Okay, so before we go any further, shalom, shalom, shalom lachem, uvruchim habaim la'arutz hakatan sheli. Today, Hayom, we are going to be discussing Ben HaPoretz. Ben HaPoretz, the one who breached both the womb and the tomb. The one who breached both the womb and the tomb. So starting out, before we move into exactly what these fences and what these hedges are, there's a thought that I want to put into your mind, if you would. The concept and the understanding that for every literal action biblically, there is a spiritual counterpart or a parallel. For every literal earthly work or action, okay, within the confines of the Torah, there is a spiritual reality and a counterpart. Well, Dave, don't just tell me something, give me some examples. Well, okay, here are a couple. And number one, Number one, Moshe Rabbeinu was required, okay, to build the moving sanctuary in the wilderness. He was required to move the Mishkan based on a tavnit, a pattern that was shown to him in the mountain by the Most High, by the Holy One, blessed be He, by Hashem, by Yahuwah. He was required to build that earthly moving Mishkan that was based on a heavenly reality. That's one. Number two, think of the words of Yeshua, okay? When he says that whatsoever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven. Whatsoever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven. These things are relevant. These things are very relevant and relative, in that this statement is dealing strictly with halacha, the way in which to walk, okay? These are instructions that are given from community to community on how to literally walk out the commandments of the Torah. But again, you see that there is an earthly parallel with whatever you permit or forbid on earth, the same will be looked upon as in heaven. And then and even more importantly, don't forget that in Yeshua's pattern to pray, when he gave us the pattern to pray, he said, thy will be done on earth as it's already in heaven. So there is an attempt, if you would, to bridge two planes here. The heavenlies, where the Most High is sovereign, he's sovereign everywhere, but where things are at rest, there is no chaos or no disorder in heaven. But that the same would be reflected on the earth as it is in heaven. And it's up to us to bridge that plane Yeshua being the ladder that extends from heaven to earth. We will get to that a little bit later on. What else can I offer before we move on to discussing the concept of the fence or the Torah as a fence? Well, that's it. I don't think we have to belabor that. Let's move. Let's dig in and go forward. Okay, so first and foremost, the Torah has been looked upon. The Torah has been looked upon as a fence or as a hedge about the people of Israel. Okay, and if you remember from some of the earlier videos, we understand what a hedge in the form of thorns, in the form of thistles, how they were used in order to protect the flock, which is part of our our primary verse from Micah, the book of Micah, chapter 2, verse 13. Flocks, okay, those that are vulnerable, those who are following their shepherd, they were always encircled in dardarim, thorns and are thistles, a thick bush or hedges with pricks on them, okay, that would protect them from predators on the outside, where they would have safe passage to come in and to go out and find pasture, come in and be safe, and on and on and on. So example number one, Adam and Chava in the garden, okay, they had 10,000 trees that they could eat from, right? 9,000, let's just say, this is just a number, 9,999 trees are yours. But there is one in particular that you do not eat from. Okay? That you do not eat from. When Adam and Chava breached that fence, okay, because there was a fence put in front of them, a fence in the form of a commandment: do not eat from this tree, or else this is what will happen. When Adam and Chava, okay, breached that hedge, breached that fence, a piercing took place. And this is the thought to keep in mind here. Whether it be thorns and thistles, or whether it be the shinaim of a nachash, the teeth of a serpent, when a hedge is breached, there will be a piercing. We know that piercing brings blood. Blood is the life of every creature. If there's a letting out of blood, there consequently will be death. Very interesting verse that you should write down in the book of Kohelet or Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 8. Let's take a peek at it. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 8. And it basically says that, here it is. Okay, Ecclesiastes 10, verse 8. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it. And whosoever breaketh a hedge or breaches a hedge, a serpent shall bite him. Think about this. What happened when Adam and Chava breached that hedge or reached through that fence that was intended to protect them? They were bitten by a snake. And consequently, as time went on, you know, we get the first mentioning of the seed of the woman, the seed, singular seed of the woman, that would come forward eventually and crush the head of the serpent, and he would bruise his heel. Even though in earlier circles, I will admit, or latter circles, it took a long time basically for that particular verse in Genesis to be recognized as a messianic prophecy, okay? But it doesn't matter nonetheless. The handwriting is literally on the wall. That's exactly what it was. It was an allusion to someone who would latter come. Also, speaking of thorns, Genesis chapter 3, verse 18. After the fall, Adam is told, when you work the earth to till it for bread, thorns and thistles, kotzim v'darim, thorns and thistles it will yield to you. I wrote down a couple of interesting things to note about thorns and briars and sticky things. Okay. Um, Think of the general unpleasantness of thorns if you happen to prick a finger or step on one, okay? It's not so much that they're so much horrible to look at, but they're very plain and nondescript. The unpleasantness of thorns and how they often precede something that we desire, such as a fruit, okay? The meat of a cactus. Um, how about Again, Adam tilling the earth. He's trying to get that to make bread, but nothing but he has to pick the thorns and thistles to get out of the way. Um, Man, think of cotton. Think of our ancestors being enslaved and having to pick cotton. How much crimson stained white cotton plant was there from the number of thorns that our ancestors they let blood because of being stabbed by these thorns and these thistles. How about a rose? How about a rose? Chabatzelet HaSharon. Chabatzelet HaSharon from Shir HaShirim, from the Song of Songs. The Rose of Sharon, right? If you want to enjoy, handle, and smell a rose in a lot of cases, if you're anxious to do so, if you grab it, because what is it that you want? You want the rich red colored flower that's atop, okay? And you want to smell it, you want to handle it, okay? This rose, but in haste, if you grab a hold of it, you're going to let go of it really quickly too, because there are thorns, okay? So the Torah itself being viewed as having a hedge about it, or not the Torah itself, the Torah as a hedge, excuse me, around Am Yisrael is something that is found early in um, by comparison, it's found early within the Tanakh. Okay, and we can see where the concept comes forward. Okay, let me read you a little reference here. This one comes in particular from someone called Ramban. Ramban. He was Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman. Ben Nachman. He was called Nachmanides by the more Greek type. He lived in the 13th century CE. This is how he describes the birth of Ben HaPoretz of Peretz, okay? This is how he describes the birth of Peretz, because keep in mind, as the Mashiach goes, because he's a singular representative of the nation of Israel, okay, it's by his zichut, or by his merit, okay, that we have access to return home, and that we have access to the Father in heaven. Um, so as the nation goes, so does the Messiah. We see this through Isaiah chapter 52, Isaiah 53, and on and on and on. From out of Egypt I call my son, the people, the nation as a whole. From out of Egypt I called my son. Yeshua the Mashiach, okay, was called out of Egypt after he was sent there for a season in order to protect him and hide him from his enemies, on and on and on. There's a time and period where the path of the Mashiach and the people of Israel are parallel. They run side by side. And then in some cases, they veer off, but they come back in, and they veer off and they come back in. But this is what the Ramban wrote about the birth of Peretz, the one who would break through. It says, he was encircled by a hedge and enclosed in it. That is why it is said, this is how you have breached the hedge and came out from within it. So you remember, to refresh your memory, Paretz or Peretz is one of the two twins, okay, who broke out, literally, okay, which is why his name was given as such. He broke out of his mother's womb. His right arm, or his arm, came flying out of his mother's womb, yikes, and the Hamiladot, or the midwife, tied a tola'at shani, a red crimson cord, around the wrist of the child, and he pulled his arm back in. And she said, the midwife said, this is the one who came out first. But the words of his mother, Tamar, it's what's very interesting. She said, Ma paratzta alecha, paretz. What a breach you have made from upon yourself. Meaning, understood by the sages and by those who have studied the word, that which he breached out of was upon him. It had him trapped, or it had him encircled, and he had to break out of it. Now, let's not forget, in the basic hermeneutics involved with Hebrew scripture, we understand that we can never stray away from the bare bones, naked meaning of the text. Okay, other scripture can be used in order to bolster your interpretation, but we can never stray away from the literal meaning of the text. But as I said to you at the beginning, it is shown throughout scripture that real time earthly actions have spiritual parallels, spiritual ruchanit, spiritual parallels. Not only is this no different, this is one of the cornerstones instances that we are to be speaking of. There's another reference in Midrash Rabbah. Midrash Rabbah, again, this is one of the wonderful books that I introduced to you last time I saw you. Okay, Midrash Rabbah. This one in particular is Bereshit, Genesis, and Shmot, Exodus. Okay, I also have Midrash Rabbah and Midrash Ruth as well. Okay, Midrash Rabbah covering the other. Midrash Rabbah that covers the other three books, Vayikra, which we call Leviticus, Vayikra, and he called Bamidbar, Numbers, literally meaning in the wilderness, and then finally Dvarim, Deuteronomy and or matters. But here is what Midrash Rabbah Shesh says, okay? It says, when Peretz arose, history began to be fulfilled through him, because Messiah would eventually come through him, and in his days, the Holy One, blessed be he, would cause death to be swallowed up. So he's saying that history began to be fulfilled with the birth of Peretz, okay, because through him eventually, later on down the line, The King Messiah, Melech HaMashiach, would come, and in the days of Melech HaMashiach, the Most High would cause death to be swallowed up. Is that not the case? Whether you, not everyone, but whether a lot of you on the other side of this screen discredit writings that come from rabbinic minds, or if it triggers you saying rabbinic, let's just say people way back when, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Okay? If it walks congruent, if it falls within agreement of scripture, not only scripture, but the witnesses, Ha'idut, the Brit HaChadashah. These are letters and commentary. Letters and commentary. The Gospels are the direct words of Yeshua the Messiah, Ben HaPoretz, the one who this Midrash was just speaking of. But you can clearly find the hermeneutical exegetical standards used by New Testament writers that came right from the same school that these commentators write from. It's undeniable, even in the fences that Yeshua himself put up. Literally in the fences, and I don't have to go through them, but you know them. It is written, don't commit adultery. But I tell you, don't even look upon a woman with a lustful heart, okay? Because you've already committed it. Don't look. Turn your eyes away, okay? What is the purpose of fencing then? The purpose of fencing is the perfect example that I gave you with the rose. The rose is pristine, it's beautiful, it's lush, it's red, it's fragrant. It is the crown. It's the crown. It's the thing that you want to protect. So thorns are put around crowns. Think of that. This is the way the ancients thought of it. Thorns are placed around crowns in order to preserve the crown. Keter is a crown that goes up on your head. Kotsim or kotz is a thorn. This is also related to, for those of you who are enthusiasts of the Hebrew language and the scribal flares of what we call a tag or a kotz, thorns. Okay, Yeshua called them a tittle. Okay, in Matthew chapter 5, he called it a tittle. These are symbology and reminders to the faithful readers that the Torah is to have a hedge built about it in order to protect it and to preserve it, in order to preserve it. We'll get back to the Midrashim just a little bit later on, okay? But here, let's move forward. Let's take a look again at our original text. Let's take a look again at our original text. We're going back to Micah, the book of Micah, chapter 2, verse 12 and 13. Okay, just as a refresher. Micah chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. Verse 12 reads as follows: Esof Yaakov kulach. I will gather, surely I will regather Yaakov, Jacob. Okay? All of you. Kabet she'erit Israel. Gather, surely I will gather a remnant of Israel. A remnant, she'erit is that word, she'erit. A remnant is something that we definitely have to talk about because it is key. It's very important to understand, and not only is it coming up in so many conversations that I've heard within our community and even outside of our community in the greater Torah keeping world, in the Jewish world, and wherever, everyone's talking about that word she'erit or remnant. Okay, it's very important to understand what a remnant is and how small a remnant is, because this is why Yeshua says that, narrow is the way that leads to life, okay? And very few will find it. Very few will find it. So, again, starting at the top of verse 12. Asof Yaakov kulach kabet she'erit Israel yachad. He will gather them all together. Yachad asimenu kitzon botzra. and I will gather them all together like the herds of sheep, like the sheep of Botzra. Rather, that's a place, because the name does appear in Isaiah chapter 11, I believe. I'm not sure. It's either a person or a place that's known for having a lot of sheep. Okay? Betoch Ke'eder betoch hadabro. So he will gather them together like one single herd. Okay? Betoch hadabro tehimena me'adam. The noise of them will be so great because of all of their chatter and all of their talking. Cha 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 cha. All of that chatter and all their talking. Verse 13. Here comes our word. Allah HaPoretz lifnehem. Someone known as the Poretz will go up, will ascend. Allah will go up before them. Partsu ve'avoru sha'ar. And they all together. Okay, so the herd following this one who is known as the breaker, it says that they will all breach. Partsu, they will all breach and pass through the gate. That's important, the gate. Ve'yatsuvo, and will go through it or go through him. Okay, a gate, sha'ar, okay, singular, sha'arim is plural. It's a masculine word, okay? So a gate can be, when you use the modifying word bo or vo, you could say in it or in him, through it or through him. Same as the sulam, as the ladder that Yaakov saw in his dream. Again, I can't reference all of these things. They're important. But the ladder or the sulam, it's a masculine word, sulam, ladder that Yaakov saw that went from the earth up to the heavens, and Yud He Vav He was at the top of the ladder. But I want you to think about this parallel. There is a direct parallel between the dream of Yaakov and this verse right here, because in both cases there is a means of travel. In this particular case, there is a gate. Okay, there is a gate and someone's leading. In the case of Yaakov's dream, there is a ladder. Malachim, ulim ve'yordimbo. Messengers, not just, don't get stuck on the angel thing. Messengers are ascending and descending on him, on it, on him. Okay? But at the top of the ladder is Yud He Vav He. And in this particular instance, listen to the end of the verse. Allah poretz lifnehem, and the breaker will ascend before them. Partsu ve'avoru. Okay, they will breach and they will pass through Shar, the gate, V'yitzuvo, and go out through it, or through him. V'ya'avor malkam lifnehem, and their king will go before them. But guess who is out at the head of them? V'yehuah berosham, and Yud He Vav He is at the head of them. It's at the head of them. It is directly related. So let's just talk about the lush imagery of this picture for a second that's laid out in front of us in the prophecy in Micah chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. First of all, where's our friend here? Here's our friend, your favorite and my favorite, the dry erase board. So I mentioned the womb as being a place of mercy, okay? A place of compassion in part 1 of this video. And I want you to keep that same thing in mind, because the word rechem, womb, and rachem, mercy, they have the exact same letters, okay? The pen or the enclosure that sheep are placed into that are made of thorns and thistles and rock is considered in the same case as looked upon as a womb. I'm going to make you a crude drawing because, see, when shepherds would travel and they would go very far away from home, they had multiple stations set up in the old days where they built up short walls, okay? Short walls made out of brick and rock, okay, in order to protect their herd. And the opening, okay, see how it's round and there's only one way in and one way out. The major part of these penning stations were typically put together and left there and they would travel in a circuit in order to graze the sheep. Okay, you got to let things grow back. Because I don't know if you've ever seen sheep or goats graze, but they eat everything that looks remotely green. So in your traveling, this is why you remember when Yosef was sent by his father Yaakov to check on his brothers, he had to go really far. Okay, you got to cover a lot of ground in order to move these sheep around in order to feed and to graze. But then, even in completing that circuit, you have to give the earth time to yield and grow again, right? So, this is why you build stations like this out of brick and rock, okay? And they just sit there. Once you make your pass back through that area, then you can utilize it again. But once they get all of their sheep inside, I want you to notice something. The womb or the opening, okay, no disrespect here. Sometimes you have to issue disclaimers for some of us, all right? So they bridge that opening, with I'm sorry, with thorns. Thorns, really bushy, prickly, thick thorns and rocks, okay? Because by and large, this is all you find primarily out in these wide open spaces. When it comes to thorns, it's plenteous, you know, thorns and thistles and briar bushes, okay? And trust you me, I don't care how much wool you've got up on you. If you bounce up against some of this enough, you're going to retreat. I mean, the thorns pierce. They pierce. I've seen this stuff. It ain't no joke. And in some cases where they haven't ventured all that often, they will build this entire enclosure in that thorn, briar, and thistle. Kotsim v'darim. Okay, exactly what Adam was told that would be yielded to him. Okay, so now it's amalgamated. The way they shut the door off, it's amalgamated with stones, in a lot of cases, smaller stones, in a big heap, in order to keep the sheep from getting out. Now, notice the imagery. Let's pay attention to the imagery in this prophetic verse. Imagine, imagine if you've been penned up all night as a sheep, you know, you've been penned up all night inside of this place. So you're content. Shepherds are walking everywhere, keeping watch over their flock by night, yeah? But now once the shachar or the pre-dawn starts to come about, there's tal or dew on the grass. And these sheep, when they start to stir and move around, they can smell the dew on that grass. And when I tell you it smells like, I don't know, depending on what area you're from, if you're Bishop William Brown, it's probably trap house chicken. It smells like trap house chicken. Or if you're from the South somewhere, I don't know, maybe it smells like your Papa's brisket house or somewhere like that. But it's time to eat and they can smell it. So they get anxious, okay? And they want to be let out. Not only do they want to be let out, they can see their king. They can see their shepherd standing outside. They want to be where he is because they know that where he is, everything that they need is there. He that has an ear, let him hear. They know also that they can retreat back and forth into that safe space. They can go out and find pasture and they can come back in, John chapter 10. Go out and find pasture, the wide open spaces where their king is, and they can come back in within the hedge for protection. So what begins to happen is as they begin to smell the sweet, sweet, sweet dew on this grass, right? The dinner bell is ringing. There was always, okay, pre first century even, the biggest shepherd, the biggest and strongest shepherd, and the boldest one, by the way, was known as guess who? HaPoretz. HaPoretz, the breaker. And he would take his staff and he would start to chip away at these rocks at the opening. And he would start to violently chip away at the opening of this womb in an attempt to breach it, okay? And as he's breaking as he's breaking at this opening of the womb of the pen or the womb, the other sheep or the sheep around him recognize what he's trying to do, so they start to help him, and they claw away and they hoof away at these rocks. Okay, now the breaker has to be careful. Okay, because once an opening is big enough for one sheep to get through, they get even more anxious and they start to rush the opening. And if he doesn't get out of the way, the king's gonna get ranted it over. All right. So then they burst through the gate. But when they burst through the gate, their king or their shepherd is out in front of them, and the object of their desire, the one who sent the king, is in the wide open spaces. So there's an initial breach made by their king, and then as they pass through with him, they too become breachers who open the way for others. Tell me you don't see it. Stop playing with me. Tell me you don't see it. Okay, so this is the rich imagery that I wanted to put in your head about those verses. So let me share before I go any further, okay? Because I never want to be accused of, giving you too much oral this or oral that. And he barely even talked about the Bible. He didn't say barely two words about the Tanakh. Okay, so I want there to be a balance. But of course, it goes without saying that I should tell you that I believe in the Word. Chiefly and primarily, there are differences of opinion when it comes to interpretation and X, Y, and Z, but the bottom line is that the word is the foundation. And as I said, in the Hebraic hermeneutic system of pardes, pashat, bare naked level, the bare bones meaning of the text has to be protected. And even if you go from pashat all the way to sod, which is secret, things that are hidden within the text, the sod can never transgress against the simple. Pashut, pishita, okay, Aramaic word. It can never, the deeper level or the hidden things that can be discovered there can never transgress the bare bones meaning of the text. So I want to share this rabbinic parallel with you about in Micah chapter 2, verses 12 and 13. Okay, so it puts it like this. It says that there was an enclosure, 4 by 4. It's always a square number. Okay, you in rabbinic literature or commentary, if you run across an enclosure or a box that is squared equally, 4 by 4, 8 by 8, 12 by 12, and on and on and on, it is generally a euphemism for the Torah. Okay, it's an enclosure for safety. So the great king, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, made a 4 by 4 enclosure, okay? And he put his faithful few inside of that enclosure, and he only put a small door. He who has ears, let him hear. He put only a small door or a small window in the enclosure. So as long as his faithful few could look through the small door or the small opening, and see him, they were content. Okay, they were content. Remember, the city in Revelation is a 4 square city. It's built 4 square. It's related. It's related. So he put them in the box because he wanted to see who was serving him, okay, out of love or out of fear. Because again, the box or the enclosure represents, okay, the Torah within the rules, within the framework, okay, within the framework of the rules, right? So those who served him out of fear and only fear, whether that's fear, or reverential fear, they were content with seeing him through the small door or small window, but staying within the box. However, those who wanted intimacy, those who wanted much more, those who wanted to be out in open pasture where the object of their desire, their king was, they began to attempt to force themselves through the small window. And they forced themselves and they forced themselves. And what they did, in essence, think of a sheep with a whole lot of wool. Okay, the only way a sheep with a whole lot of wool is going to get through a small orifice or a small opening is to shave himself down or to whittle himself down. Think of the parallel, or the mashal, the parable that Yeshua spoke of, or the parable like words that he used when the young man asked him. He says, Rabbi, ezohi mitzvah hagdola b'chol Torah. What is the greatest commandment in all the Torah? And Yeshua quotes what? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Okay? ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. You should love him with all your heart, mind, and soul. And then he said, okay, Hasheni domala. And the second one is similar to it, similar to her, similar to it. Ve'ahavta ra'ocha kamocha. And you will love your neighbor as you love yourself. Al shtei hamitzvot talui kol haneviim et kol haTorah. On these two commandments, talui hangs all of the law and all of the prophets. Okay, what happened next? Which one should I keep? He says, you have life. Okay, parallel. We're taking different conversations, but we're paralleling, the heart of the matter here. Which commandments should I keep? If you'll have life, keep the commandments, Yeshua said. All right, sorry, Christianity, but that's what he said. And which ones? He names off a few. And he says, oh, these I've all kept from my youth. Okay, well, all you have to do is shave off a little of your wool. If you want to get through the small door or through the small window, you got to shave off a little wool in order to fit through. What's the wool in this particular case? Oh, he was a very rich man. He had a whole lot to lose. So he went away sad, right? Yeshua turns and says, it's easier for a gemel. It's easier for a mooring rope, not a camel. A lot of people argue, against it. He really meant camel. Okay, but consequently in Aramaic, okay, those same consonants make up for a mooring rope. And in order to get a big old mooring rope through the eye of a needle, you'd have to peel some of the strings off and keep whittling the strings until you get it down enough to get it into the opening. Is the same thing. Once again, we have a parable that comes out. And it not only mirrors the words of Yeshua, it agrees. They're in agreement. Okay, what else? Let's take a look at John, at the book of John, which I was mentioning, John chapter 10. The book of John, back to the scriptures. If we take a look in the book of John, chapter 10, check out these words. Starting at verse 4. Okay, we'll start at verse 1. John chapter 10, verse 1. Verily, verily, I say to you, whoever enters not by the door, okay, into the sheepfold, whoever enters not by the door into the sheepfold, but he climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber, okay? But he that enters in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. There's one way and one way in, and only the shepherd of the sheep knows that way. Verse 3, to him the porter opens. To him the porter opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he puts forth his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Okay, let's jump up a little bit to verse 8, or to verse 7. He says, verily, verily, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. Ego a me, I am the door of the sheep. Verse 8, all that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. Verse 9, I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and go out and find pasture. Okay? Malachim olim veyordim. So messengers going up and down on the ladder. Okay? But then he just made mention of He just made mention of, in verse 9, they shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture. Go in and out and find pasture. So again, we find, again, more parallels to this frame of thought. What else, David? Well, how about the curious case, for those of you who like mysteries, the curious case of the disappearing Vav, the curious case of the disappearing Vav. And what am I talking about? Well, here's what you should know. The Torah, our book, is such a vastly different book. It has levels of mystery that will just plain and simply blow your mind. These things you will only see in Hebrew. Okay, you will not see it in your English Bibles. This is not a discovery of mine. It's been pondered for a long time, once again, by those who have had their hands on the book, the ancients, those who have gone way back. And they've pondered this and they've pondered this. Okay, nothing happens by accident. There's no accidental stroke or whatever. Again, Yeshua also made the importance of again, in Matthew chapter 5. Here, let's read it before I go to this mystery here. If you look in Matthew chapter 5, where Yeshua is having the conversation, he makes mention of the importance of every single stroke or letter in the Torah. Every single stroke or letter. Nothing is superfluous. Okay, if it's there, it has a meaning. If it's there, it has a meaning. So, verse 17. You know this verse, chapter 5, verse 17 of Matityahu says, Al tachshevu shebati levatel et haTorah o et hanevi'im. Don't even think that I have come to levatel, to cancel out the Torah or the prophets. Lo bati levatel, I didn't come to cancel out. Ki'im lekayem, but to fortify, to stand up, to make it fully known, to make it fully understood. Here he is, verse 18. Amen omer ani lachem ad asher ya'avoru hashamayim v'ha'aretz, until the heavens and the earth pass away. Af yod achat, not one letter yod, the smallest letter in the alphabet, not one yod, o tag echad, or one thorn. He's talking about the decorative thorn or flares, crowns that are put upon the letters of certain letters by the scribes, by the sofrim. Not one of them, okay, lo yavoru min haTorah beterem yitkayem hakol. Not even the single stroke or flare or decorative crown made out of thorns. Crowns of thorns, be careful, that's coming. If you're in tune, you already picked up on that, okay? The crowns on top of the letters are kotsim. The keter is a kots, or the ketarim are kotsim. The crowns are made out of thorns on these letters, you guys. On these letters, you guys. Oh, this, we're at 48 minutes. We could go on for forever. But I know we can't do that. But I'll give you as much as I can to think on until I come back to touch this subject again, because it will be necessary. But I don't want to part 3 it. What happens, happens. If it's an hour and a half, it's going to be an hour and a half. And it looks like we're kind of heading that way. But bear with me, please. If you're still there, I appreciate you. Okay. So he goes on to talk about the importance of Torah, and about the slightest and the smallest things that most people would disregard. So here's the case with the case of the disappearing Vav, as I put it. And I'm going to have to write this down for you. But this is something that has been mulled. This is something that has been pondered for quite some time. And those who are in the know I guess if you want to say it that way, or just were stumped by it. But they knew that this particular thing was significant. You're looking for Ruth, chapter 4, verse 18 is where I'm going to take you. Ruth, chapter 4, verse 18. That is the beginning place. Well, that's one of two places. Ruth 4:18, and the other place is Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. So to show you how often I don't use an English Bible, I have to actually go to the table of contents to find where Ruth is, because everything's in a different order in the Hebrew Bible. Page 309. Bless David's little heart. So, Ruth chapter 4, verse 18. Okay, that's one of the places. It's a bookend thing I'm doing here. Ruth 4:18. That's the ending point. Genesis 5:1 is the beginning point. Okay. And then there's one point right before that, which is going to be Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. But let's start in Ruth chapter 4, verse 18. The prophetic book of Ruth that shows the picture of the coming Messiah, the son of Peretz, it ends with a genealogy. It ends with a genealogy in verse 18. But let's look at that in verse 17. Let's go up before I get to 18. So it says, verse 17, and the women her neighbors, speaking of Naomi, and the women her neighbors gave it a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Oved, which is a servant. Okay, the names are important here as well. He is the father of Yishai. Yishai, which is a Hebrew name, Jesse. Yishai has to do with the loftiness of the highness of the Most High. The father of David. Verse 18. David, of course, name means beloved. Now these are the generations of Peretz. Peretz begot Hezron, and Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Aminadav. Okay, so look at these names. Peretz, we know, is the one who broke through. Why are they going back? Okay, at the end of the book of Ruth, the prophetic book of Ruth, why are they going to a genealogy and they're starting with Peretz? Okay, one of the two twins, the one who thrust his arm out of the womb. Again, earthly works or earthly actions have spiritual parallels and realities in the heavenlies. Peretz is the one who broke through. He begat someone named Chetzron. Guess what Chetzron means? Chetzron means from the word chatzar, which means an enclosure, okay, or a box, or it's also for a yard or a courtyard. Like, for example, in the psalm dedicated to Shabbat, Psalm 92, it says, "Tzaddik katamar yifrach." A righteous man is like a date palm. Okay, he will flourish. Ke'eretz balvanon yisge, and like the cedars of Lebanon, he will stand, right? Shitulim bevet Adonai, planted in the house of the Most High in the temple. Bechatzrot, Chetzron is the name. Bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu, and in the courtyards of the Most High, he will flower and blossom. Okay, Chetzron comes from the word chatzar, which means a box, an enclosure, or a courtyard. Okay, an inner courtyard or box, something that is protected. All right, Chetzron begot Ram. Ram, like the Arab town Ramallah. Ram is high, lofty, lifted. Okay, even though he's a crook. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. Politicians are he. Ram Emanuel. Okay, Jewish guy. I think he's a mayor of Chicago now. That's where his name comes from. Ram. Yirmiyahu, a better example than all of them. Yirmiyahu, the prophet. Ram is the root of his name. Okay, and Ram begot Aminadav. Ami, my people. Nadav are cheerful givers, or it's a modern Hebrew word, Nadav. is for someone who's a volunteer, who gives without expectation of recompense. He begat someone named Nachshon. Nachshon, okay, sounds like Nachash, like a snake, yeah, but the hiss in the whisper, it also suggests someone who speaks prophetically, who whispers, okay? Lachash means to whisper, okay? So he whispers that which he hears, okay? Okay, and then on down to Boaz. Salmon and Boaz. Boaz is one of the names of the two pillars in front of the temple. Okay, one was called Yachin on the other side of the door, and the other one was called Boaz, which means in him is strength. Remember the word I said, bull? The ladder can be sulam, the ladder that the angels were going up and down, because it's a masculine word, can be modified with the word bull, him or it, okay? Boaz, in him is strength. Finally, Boaz begat Obed, who is a servant, and Obed begot Yishai or Jesse, and Yishai begot David, and eventually we know who came from David, Ben HaPoretz. So out of Peretz, all the way down through King David until you get to Yeshua the Messiah. So what is the deal with the disappearing Vav, David, that you keep talking about, but you haven't shown us? I'm going to show you. Well, very curiously, you know that the Vav, the letter Vav, is valued at 6, and it is the symbol of a man. Tent peg, a man, all of these things, yes? So, if you look in Ruth chapter 12, Ruth chapter 4, verse 18, as we just looked at, and you need a Hebrew Bible in order to do that, sorry. You'll notice that when it starts off with the words ve'ele toldot, and these are the generations, and these are the genealogies, okay? You'll notice that it's spelled with two vavs, okay? Ele toldot, these are the generations of. But, see my green vavs there? But, if you go to Genesis chapter 5, verse 1, which is where I initially pointed, which I said is the other end of that, Genesis chapter 5, verse 1 is immediately after the fall. Notice what happens to the spelling of the word toldot in your Hebrew Bible. I'll wait for you. Pull out that Hebrew Bible. Again, a recap. In the genealogy in Ruth chapter 4, verse 18, you will find that the word toldot is spelled with two vavs. But look at what happened immediately after the fall. Immediately after the fall, in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1, let's read it together. Ze Sefer Toldot Adam. This is the book of the generations, Toldot, of Adam. And guess how it's spelled? Immediately after the fall, in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1, Toldot loses a vav. It's cantillated as such, but it loses a vav. 6, or the letter vav, is a symbol of a man, a tent peg, or a nail, the one who holds it down, the one who holds down the house. Okay, without that peg, the house flaps around and flies in the wind. Man fell, and the word toldot lost a vav. Now you say, okay, David, well, you might be set tripping a little bit. Well, not me anyway. Go back to the people who discovered this. The ancients were set tripping. They just didn't have anything to do, and they were sitting and they were watching letters and doing X, Y, and Z. You could think that if you want to, but if you look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, you'll see that Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, all of these verses start off the same, pretty much. Genesis 2 and 4 reads as follows. Ele toldot hashamayim v'haaretz. These are the genealogies or the generations of the heavens and the earth. And guess how that's spelled? This is before the fall. Genesis 2:4 is before the fall. And you guessed it. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, the word toldot has two vowels. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 4, Genesis has two vowels. In Ruth chapter 4, verse 18, the word toldot has two vowels. So when man fell, the next time the word was used in Genesis 5:1, it lost a vav, and it did not have a vav again until Ruth chapter 4, verse 18. Ask yourself, how many times was that, David, since you're tripping on numbers, right? Jews and numbers, okay? Asukim b'misparim, uh, obsessed with numbers. 39 times. 39 times the word is used, the word toldot is used between Genesis chapter 5, verse 1 and Ruth chapter 4, verse 18. In all 39 of those times, it was missing a vav. The vav did not reappear again until the genealogy found in Ruth chapter 4, verse 18. What does it mean? Well, you can build a sermon out of it. You can build a lot of books, or you can write a lot of books, but I can tell you that if Yeshua regarded every stroke, every yod, and every tug as important, I can guarantee you that this was important. And again, let me go back again to the words of Ramban. Ramban, when he said the hedge, the Peretz was encircled, says he was encircled by a hedge and enclosed by it. That is why it is said, this is how you have made a breach upon the hedge and you have come out from within it. How about the other guys? Midrash Rabbah, where it says, when Peretz arose, history began to be fulfilled through him because Messiah would eventually come through him in his days. But what was the important thing? Another one of the big important things that would take place, according to this commentary, because Messiah would eventually come through him, and in his days, in the days of King Messiah, the Holy One, blessed be he, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, would cause death to be swallowed up, in keeping with Isaiah chapter 25, verse 8. And you remember this from part 1. That verse says, Bila'ah et hamavet lanetzach. Death will be swallowed up forever. Umacha Adonai Elohim dima'ah. And the Most High will wipe away every tear from your eye. It's where Paul gets his reference. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is your victory? Death has been swallowed up in victory. So this commentator knew that one of the principal jobs of the Mashiach was to vanquish death. And what role does death have to play in all of this? Well, death is the enemy that was created as a result of the failure of Adam HaKadmon, a direct result of the failure of the first Adam. Man screwed it up, and guess what? A man would have to fix it. Now again, don't be triggered, but people hate to hear someone refer to the Messiah as a man. I got news for you. He was a man. Was he much more? Sure he was. But we've been kind of given ideas of a lot of things from other people in different cultures to where we almost want to put off the fact that this was a man, okay? A superhuman from outer space didn't come to fix things that man destroyed. A man empowered by the one who sent him, okay, through the power of his spirit, is the one who overcame and was given a name above all names, okay, who was rewarded, okay, who was rewarded. Now, we could fight back and forth over theology all day long. I can tell you what the book says, and I can tell you what a lot of theological import that we brought from our church life and X, Y, and Z. You can't make the book say what it simply does not say. Adam screwed it up. Ben Adam walked around, called himself a human being the whole time he was on the planet, okay? That at least we don't have to fight about. Ben Adam, the son of Adam, or Adam, the second Adam, would be the one, as Paul refers to him, would be the one to fix it. And death was vanquished in the time of Melech HaMashiach when he came from the standpoint of we do not have to fear it anymore. The box that we were put into to preserve us, okay, and the box that we have hedged and put more things around, okay, it has a dual nature. The box has a dual nature. Remember the words of Moshe? Blessings and life I offer you on one hand, death and curses on the other hand, okay? Choose life. Okay, so the penalty for breaching the fence is what Yeshua came to rectify. The penalty for breaking the fence is death. The wages of sin is death. I hope it's becoming clear. I hope it's becoming clear. Clearer, rather. What else, David? What else? Okay, how about this? And I think this is for a final. Well, let's just do a little rundown first, and then I'm going to give you one more from the rabbinic minds, okay, that appears right in your Bible in the book of Isaiah. But I want to give you a brief rundown here about the Torah or the law as a hedge or as a fence, okay? All right, we have already talked about what happens if you obey, life and blessings. If you disobey, there's curses and death. So, the fall of Adam and Chava by breaching the fence and being bitten by a snake, okay, caused a rift between the Most High and his son, Adam HaKadmon, the Son of God. Adam, he's called this in the Bible. It created a gap between heaven and earth that would necessitate the need for a sulam or for a ladder. It also it caused man to be enclosed in something to protect him for a season of time from an aspect of that enclosure, okay, that would need to be broken out of by a son of Adam, okay, the same one who created the fence, the box, and the enclosure. One of his sons would have to break through it, okay, and open the way for others. And then those who overcame and breached along with him would have to hold the way open for others as well. The plan for a kinsman redeemer, the kinsman redeemer kicks in it is foreshadowed in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, as we talked about. The serpent bruising the heel and the man crushing the head of the snake. The kinsman redeemer had to be just that. The kinsman redeemer had to be not only a son of Adam, but a son of the promised line from a promised seed, who eventually came through Abraham, Yitzchak, and then Yaakov, and then by way from Yaakov through his son Yehudah. Yehudah had the relationship with Tamar. They had twins, one named Chetzron and the other one called Peretz, who broke through on the physical plane. On the physical plane, but he foreshadowed a spiritual reality that had already been decreed in the heavenlies. A man born under the law. Yeshua, born under the law. Now, it's funny. Speak into Google when you get a chance or type in Jesus born under the law. You'll find some entrances that will tell you straight up that he was not born under the law, even though it says it right there in the Bible that he was. There's this hyper need to get rid of the humanity of the Messiah, to kick it to the side. And you have to ask yourself, why? Would you write a full-blown article saying that he's not born under the law when he was born in the appointed time, sent forth his son, born under the law, subject to the same thing that you and I were subject to? But what did he do? He didn't break anything. He didn't breach anything, but he became sin for us. So by becoming sin for us and taking on all these things for us, right? Where does the breaking through come in? Because again, we've talked about the physical standpoint of that. We haven't talked about the spiritual parallel yet. This is where we're going to get in closing. And it's going to come with this next thing that we're going to look at. But the breaking out was necessary in order to bridge the gap between the Most High and his creation, which was created as a result of Adam, and then consequently the enemy that was created as a result of the breaching of the fence, which was death, was something that lingered over man. Okay, this is the law of sin and death. It is the flip side of the coin of Torah. Okay, this is what Paul means when he says that we are not under the law. Okay, huponomon, it means that we are not subjected to the penalty, okay, that the law prescribes, which is death, by breaking it, because that price has been paid already once and for all. Once and for all, it's been paid for. So let's do this and we're going to be done. But we have to take it home from the standpoint of we have to talk about Ben HaPoretz, the one who breached the womb and the tomb. Breaching the tomb, okay, is the spiritual and heavenly reality of having breached the womb. Because the tomb is much more than just a place to lay the dead. It is finality. It is Rega HaEmet. It's the moment of truth. It's something that everyone has to deal with. This is why it's solemn and quiet in places where people have passed away. People take their hats off. People do whatever. A hush and a silence falls over people when they hear that someone has passed away. But in Isaiah chapter, where is it? In Isaiah, Yeshayahu chapter 9, a very curious thing happens, also in line with Hebrew lettering, okay? And it's very big, okay? And it's interesting at the least, even if you don't buy it, it's very interesting the way the ancients looked upon these passages. But in chapter 9, verse 6, it's famous, you know about it. Let's start at verse 5. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 5, and we're going to use the dry erase board, and we'll be done. I hope you're getting something out of this, even if it's just understanding the viewpoints and why things are viewed in a certain way. I hope that it's substantive for you and that it can be of use. Yeshayahu, or Isaiah chapter 9, verse 5, reads as follows: Ki yelad yulad lanu, for a son, for a child is born to us. Ben natan lanu, and a son is given to us. Fatehi hamisra al shichmo, and the government will be across his shoulders. Vayikra shmo Pele Yoretz El Gibor, and his name will be called Wondrous Counselor, El Gibor, Mighty Warrior, El Gibor, Mighty Warrior, Mighty God, whatever you want to use. El Elohim can be used for a lot of different things. Elohim can be used for a judge. Elohim is what angels are called. Trees in the Bible are called Elohim, okay, because they sustain life, whether it be through food, holding the soil down, and later on through science we know of photosynthesis, producing oxygen. Mountains and trees are called El, or Elohim, okay? So El Gibor, Aviad, Father of Eternity, Sar Shalom, and the Prince of Peace. Notable in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Aviad is smushed together. In other codices, it has a hyphen in between it, okay? But we know that for the child that was born in this case, this child was born as a sign. Yes, the child was born, lived a nondescript life, and we never heard much more from him. So we know that the child was born was not an everlasting Father and a Prince of Peace. The child that was born was not God. Okay, but there again, behind the text, there was a literal and an earthly event that had heavenly ramifications later on. How do we know? Well, there's a little something hidden in the text that, again, you will not see in the English Bible. It says in verse 6, Lemarbe hamisra ul shalom ein ketz. Okay, and of the increase of his establishment or his government, there will be, and of his peace and wholeness, there will be no end. Al kisei David ve'al mamlachto le'achin ota. On and on he will sit on the throne of his father David, and on and on and on. I shouldn't even do this because I know you can't see it, but I want to try at the very least. Someday I'm going to be a big boy and have screen sharing and all these wonderful things, graphics, and that flashing subscribe and like button. But in verse number 8. Good grief, where'd it go? Way up here. Okay, verse number 6. At the beginning of verse number 6, the word lemarbe has a mem sofit right in the middle of the word. Of course, as you know, if you know anything about basic Hebrew, a mem sofit is called a mem sofit because the word sof means the end. Mem appears in a final form, but only at the end of the word. It doesn't appear in the middle of the word. Should I even try it? Verse 6. If you can see verse 6, I'll leave it up there just for a second. If you can see verse 6 up in this upper right-hand corner. Let me find it again. Yeah. Right next to my finger there is the beginning of verse 6. And you'll notice that the word lemarbe has a mem sofit right after the lamed. You can even pause it and blow it up and look at it if you need to. It has a mem sofit. What in the world is a mem sofit doing in the middle of a word? Did Isaiah have an aneurysm? Did he not know? Did he not know how to write Hebrew? Well, no, I don't think that's the case. I think it's safe to say that that's not the case. So in a different color here, I'm going to give you that mem sofit the way it appears right in the middle of that word. Now, again, those who have had the Torah, for a long period of time have mulled this and mulled this. And they said, why in the world, lemarbe, why in the world did Yeshayahu put a mem sofit in the middle of a word, breaking the rules of Hebrew that had been established for a long time? Could it be that there was a clue that he wanted to leave in the text? A clue in the form of what? Either the Most High revealed it to him then and there, or a clue as to there was a sod or a secret or something much deeper being there that had a whole lot more to do than just this human boy that was born and lived an uneventful life and passed away. Well, in order to understand or to explain to you the way that it's been viewed, and by the way, with that last, in the event I left it hanging open, with that last example using the word toldot, it lost a vav, okay, after man fell. Okay, in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1. Sorry if I didn't close this loop. I get excited. Genesis chapter 5, verse 1 is where the vav was lost. Again, 39 times up until Ruth chapter 4, verse 18. That's when that vav comes back. So man was only restored in the eyes of the ancients when Peretz was born, because out of Peretz eventually would become the one who would restore that missing vav, would reestablish man, and he would no longer be viewed as fallen in the eyes of the Most High. And that vav returns, just in case I left that hanging open. But with respect to the word lemarbe, we have to look at the letter mem. the letter mem and what it means. So number one, I can tell you that a mem is representative of mime. Mime. If you look into the Paleo Hebrew, you will see that mem, the letter mem, is just a squiggly line. It represents water. Mime. Mime. Okay, mime in Arabic. Water is mai. Mai. Okay, so it represents water. It also represents the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet. If you count from Aleph up to the middle, if you count down from Tav to the middle, you'll get to the letter Mem. Okay, it's also representative of Malchut, which is kingdom, and it's also representative of Mashiach. Okay, so here is what an open Mem looks like. Here's what an open Mem looks like. Open at the bottom. That's a mem that appears anywhere else in the word except for the end. And here's what a mem sofit looks like. And a mem sofit, according to the ancients, are two dalits turned upon each other. Two dalits turned upon each other. And we know that dalit, the letter dalit, is a door. Okay? So they construed this as the gate or the heavenly door. And that at some point this door would be opened by the Most High, okay, and a Savior would come forth, or redemption, or Yeshua, not Yeshua, Yeshua. I don't want to try to project anything on to those who did not have that thought. They should have saw it that way. But Yeshua, salvation, would come through these doors. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and the King of glory shall come in. Be ye lifted up, ye everlasting door, and the King will come in through that door. Okay, through that door. So in that verse, lemarbe hamisra uleshalom ein ketz. Okay, into the fullness of, or the increase of his government and of his peace, there will be no end. So we knew that this human child, that they knew that this human child would not, lived a normal life and passed on and died, right? Without another peep. But they knew that this was much more above and beyond, and that it spoke to something that was coming much, much later. So look, let's take it home. We're at an hour and 22 minutes, by far the longest video I've ever done. But I think it was worth it. I hope you were able to hang with me, or hey, watch it in pieces. Watch it in 2 pieces, 3 pieces, 4 pieces. Have a 2-piece while you watch this in 3 pieces. Whatever it is that floats your boat, makes you happy. Okay, just don't get all that grease all over your phone. But let's take it home. The door and the gate. Yeshua said, I am the door. I am the door. Okay? I am the door to the sheep. Anyone that came before me, Gnavim b'shodedim, thieves and robbers, they all were. Yaakov had a dream of the sulam that went from the earth to the shamayim, up to the heavens. Okay, and you had messengers going up and down. People misconstrue this. Every time they see the word malach, they think of a winged creature. John the Baptist was called a malach. Okay, Yeshua was called a malach. Okay, messengers. Okay. They were going in and out, and the Most High was at the head. What else? We read John chapter 10, John chapter 1, verses 4 through 51 in my notes. I don't remember exactly what it was, but my gut tells me that it was likely important. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written it down. So let's take a look really quick. We've come this far by faith. Leaning on. So hang out with me a little bit longer. I wrote it down, so it's got to have a reason. I wrote it down in haste. So John chapter 1, verse 47. Yeah. So John 1:47 again, it's just a reference of Yeshua referencing the dream of Yaakov. Let's read it. 147. Well, 46, start at 46. And Nathanael said to him, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Smart aleck, right? Philip said to him, come and see. Okay, 47, Yeshua saw Nathanael coming to him, and he said, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no guile. Boy, how I wish that could be said about me, right? About any of us, right? Especially from the mouth of the Mashiach. Verse 48, Nathanael said unto him, from where do you know me? And Yeshua answered and said to him, before Philip called you, when I saw you standing under the fig tree. 49, Nathanael answered and said unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God. Okay, thou art the King of Israel. Again, Son of God and King of Israel. This is an understanding that was had during that time, that the Son of God and the King of Israel was one and the same. And remember, all of the Davidic kings who sat on the throne, as it says in the book of Chronicles, another reference, I can't remember right off the top of my head, that the Davidic king sat on the throne when Shlomo took over the kingdom from his father. It says, and Shlomo sat on the throne of Yud He Vav He. Yud He Vav He says that the son will be the king will be my son, and I will be his father. It was required for the king, every king, to have Mishneh Torah, a written copy of their own Torah, right? Carefully written, that they could look at it every day, right? Okay? The king of Israel was the Son of God. This is the understanding that was had of that day, and which should still be viewed today, that whoever sits as the right hand of the Most High is his son, okay? And remember, Yeshua is the firstborn of many brothers, the firstborn of many brothers, okay? All of those who believe he gave them the power to become the sons of God. We are his right hand on the earth, on a smaller level, of course, than the unique Son of the Most High, okay? But we are the arm of the Most High on the earth. Verse 50, Yeshua answered and said unto him, because I said unto you, I saw you under a fig tree, you believe? You will see greater things than these, right? Yeshua was nowhere in the area, but he's telling him, bro, I can see everything. I saw you underneath that fig tree, right? Verse 51, and he said unto him, verily, verily, I say to you, hereafter you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. The malachim of Elohim ascending and descending upon the Son of God. What else? Taking us home, right? Because I get excited toward the end, especially because I'm going to have a really, really big bowl of Captain Crunch here. Oh, yes, it's the deep things like that. Captain Crunch is such a blessing. Will tear the skin off the roof of your mouth, but oh, hallelujah. Let's go home with Psalm chapter 18. And we're going to read a few verses out of Psalm chapter 18 to take us home. Okay, perfect way to take us home, because we've covered the words of the sages, we've covered words of the ancients, but we've covered words from the Tanakh as well. We've covered words from the Brit Chadashah, and importantly, we've covered words of the Mashiach himself, right? Everything in balance, but with this breaking out and this breaking through. Ben HaPoretz breached both the womb and the tomb in that he broke out. He broke out from underneath that second nature of the Torah that had us all bound, which was death. How fitting and how ironic is it that Ben HaPoretz, Melech HaMashiach, Yeshua from Nazareth, the Messiah, that he had a crown of thorns placed upon his head and pierced into his skull. And a lot of people might not see the significance of the fact that that which bound him, being born under the law, becoming sin for us. Okay, and in Isaiah 53, it pleased him to crush him. It pleased the Most High to crush the one who he sent. Okay, to put an end, to have an object of rage against all of the sin at once in order to vanquish it, right? But it's so ironic that even in mocking him, because he said that he was a king, you put a crown of thorns upon the head of Chabatzelet HaSharon, the Rose of Sharon. If you want to handle the Rose of Sharon, if you want to smell the fragrance of the Rose of Sharon, if you want to admire the beauty of the Rose of Sharon, if you want to walk in the ways of the Rose of Sharon, you have to handle the thorns. You have to handle the thorns in order to get to the beauty of the rose. To get to the beauty of the rose. It was the fence of thorns that was always put around that which should be preserved. And Yeshua, being the word that the Most High spoke, embodied, is such a tragic at the way that, and cruel at the way at which it was done to him. But those thorns were broken out and breached and broken through. So the one who breached the womb breached the tomb for you and I, so that we are no longer subject to death. Wow, an hour and 30 minutes. But let's go home from out of Psalm chapter 118, one of the most beautiful chapters, very messianic in nature. And just as the ancients saw the breaking out through the thorns and thistles, they also saw the stones. Remember, I told you in that drawing that a lot of those temporary wombs or enclosures or pens were made primarily out of rocks. But the opening, the mouth of the opening, was covered with a combination of stones and thorns and thistles. The breaking of the stones and all of these things were also associated with the Messiah. Check this out as we go home. Psalm 118, starting at verse 15. Kol rina v'Yeshua, the voice of the sound of exultant singing and salvation, be'ohalet tzadikim, is in the tent of the righteous. Is in the tents of the righteous. Yemin Yehuah asa chayil, the right arm of the Most High has done valiantly. Verse 16. Yemin Yehuah romema, the right arm of Yehuah is exalted. Yemin Yehuah asa chayil, the right arm of the Most High has done valiantly. I love all of these, but I want to point to the ones that really ring home. Verse 19, Pitchuli Sha'arei Tzedek, open up to me the gates of righteousness, gates, doors, okay? Gates of righteousness. Avovam Odeya, I will enter into them with thanks to Yah. Verse 20, Ze hasha'ar laYahuwah, this is the gate of Yahuwah, tzadikim yavo'u bo. This is the gate of Yahuwah, and the righteous go through in it or in him. The right arm has done valiantly, okay? The right arm has achieved these things. The right arm is also the gate of the righteous that comes from the Most High, and we can enter in through him, through it, right? Through it, or through him. Verse 21 comes, oh wow, Odecha, I will thank you, ki ani tani, because I have been answered, Vatihi li Yeshua, and you have become to me my Yeshua. You have become to me my salvation. Verse 22, Even ma'asu habonim, the stone which the builders rejected, Haita le roshapina, has become the head of the corner. The ancients attached this verse and the meaning of the rocks and the stones in the same breath as they did with breaking through the hedge. Okay, because the house had to be built. But the stone which the builders rejected, now who kicked it to the side, has become the head of the corner. He's already speaking of that which hasn't happened in real time, as if it already was, because in the place where it really matters, in the heavenlies, it already had happened. This is this is David before his time. Okay, verse 23, Me'et Yehuah haitazot, from the Most High himself, this thing has come to be. He niflet be'einenu, and it is marvelous in our sight. Ze hayom asa Yehuah Nagilah v'nismecha bo. This is the day that the Most High has made, the day that the arm, The right arm came to do just. Okay, this is the day that he has made. Okay, Nagilah v'nismechabo. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Okay, in it. Ana Yehovah Hoshiana. Ana Yehovah Hatzelichana. Please, please, O Most High, deliver us. Please, please, Adonai Most High, prosper us. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is he, the one who comes in the name of Yud He Vav He. Blessed is he who comes, okay? Anticipation of the one who would come. I don't have to say another word. I don't have to say another word. The book speaks for itself. The witnesses in the form of the sages, the witnesses in the form of the writers of the Brita Chadashah, and in King David closed this out and took us home. So with that, you guys, I hope now that you understand the mystery of Ben HaPoretz, the one who would break out and break through, okay, the one who descended from the one who broke out of the womb, foreshadowing the one who would break out of the hedge or the penalty phase of Torah. And also in doing so, he would bridge the gap between creator and man, and he would vanquish death. So he breached the womb and he breached the tomb. With that, I will see you guys real soon. Bezrat Hashem, I'll see you. My next adventure is down in, Cartersville, Georgia, outside of Atlanta, with Bishop William Brown of Boom Church and the Remnant Conference. I will be a speaker on, it's the weekend of the 18th, but it goes that Friday night up until Sunday, I believe. So I'll be speaking on Friday night, Shabbat night. I'll have the privilege to share the floor with the likes of Ethiopian Rabbi Kokeb Gedamu, also the likes of B'nai Israel will be there. Dr. Kelly Richardson will be there as well. A good friend and brother of mine, Pastor Rabbi Harun Collins of Denver, Colorado. And also our host, a wonderful brother that I'm anxious to meet. And he said he's going to feed me fat, Brother Pastor Sebastian Holly. So with that, I'll leave you with the Aaronic benediction, and I will get to that Captain Crunch I've been waiting for. Okay, I love you guys all. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing and telling people about this channel and supporting everyone who's a part of our community that gives life, that pushes the fruits of the Spirit. Coming into an identity and finding out who you are and feeling empowered within that is one thing. Hate, I can't do, we shouldn't do. A tree has to have good fruit. So let's lift each other up. Okay. Yivarechecha Yehovah v'yishmarecha. Ya'er Yehovah panav elecha v'yichunecha. Yisa Yehovah panav elecha v'yasem lecha. Shalom, may the Most High, Yud He Vav He, guard over you and keep you. May the Most High, Yud He Vav He, lift his face upon you and v'yichunecha, be merciful and gracious to you. May Yud He Vav He, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, may he lift his countenance upon you, cause it to shine upon you, and give you his shalom, his wholeness, and his peace. To be lacking nothing is to be in his presence. In him we rest. This is a whole concept of rest. You know, the rest that that Naomi sought for Ruth was that she would have someone who would provide for her and protect her. It's reflected in Ruth chapter 3, verse 1. She sought menucha for Ruth, that she would be married, that she would be betrothed, and that her needs would be provided. So he is the ultimate husband. He is the ultimate shepherd. And the earth is his and the fullness thereof. Okay, you guys, much love, and I look forward to seeing you all again real soon. Bezrat Hashem, B'Shem Yeshua Mashiach. Amen and amen.